I think it's obvious to say I like video games, and I guess it's also obvious what you're about to see in this top 10, right? Okay, cool. Of course we all love video games, but naturally all of us had those special seasonings we like seeing in our video games that gives it its rich flavor. Delicious. The only rule I have is that this is my opinion, so if you are expecting my opinions to be exactly like yours, sorry, but cloning hasn't been invented yet, so I can't help you there. With that, let's kick off this trilogy of videos with the top 10 things I like in video games. Cheat codes. The reason I put this low is because cheat codes have started disappearing from video games since the early 2000s, but I do mess around and have a blast playing with them if they are in the game. While I don't mind if any navigation tools aren't given to you, it does help if they are there since I'm a terrible navigator. Knowing there is equipment around to lead you to your goal is always soothing for me to see in case I get lost. I love RPGs, but they also happen to be the genre that I'm the most cautious with. You can say that I get picky with them. My biggest problem with them is their flow. Is it going to be a smooth, enjoyable experience with plenty of variety? Or is it going to be a chore list where I have to fight the same enemy 400 times over before I level up? I think you know where this is going. I adore RPG games that put grinding onto the back burner. Now notice what I said with back burner. That means that I like grinding. That's the point of every RPG in existence. But don't make it the main focus of a game. Put in side quests, put in various other activities that can compensate for leveling, like equipment or ability customization, or try to make every RPG encounter as various as possible. I don't mind doing the occasional grind, but if it starts to become a habit, then it'll become more of a habit for me to pull those games out of the system and onto the shelves. If you think about it, this could have ended up on my things to hate list as well for the opposite concept, but I honestly like RPGs that mix things up more than I hate RPGs that do the same cookbook recipes. Also, I found something else that irritates me for the hated list with RPGs that I hate more than this, so you'll see soon enough. For now though, with RPGs, please mix them up. My attention span will be that of a mouse if I do the same redundant ritual over and over again. If there's one thing that I'll never get over in video games is when developers happen to add in a creative touch. But here's the interesting part. I actually don't care how poorly or how greatly executed it is. For example, when Hey You Pikachu came out, I played around with it for a long time. I didn't care how much it was picked on. It was something unique and I loved it for it. Same goes for Sonic 3D Blast. Even though I'm only going to play it through one time because it has a very questionable execution, I had my share of fun with it while it lasted. I'm a sucker for new toys. Anything, just anything that goes outside of the norm with video games, sign me up to take it for a thorough test run. Though there are some exceptions. If the device is known for being unplayable, like for example with the Xbox Kinect that I've tried out, then that just comes off as a cheap marketing gimmick. It also doesn't have to be taken in new directions, but also with new concepts. There are sometimes games out there that take the same old and warp it around to something pretty neat. I'd much rather see games that mix things up rather than doing the more familiar stance, even if it doesn't entirely work out sometimes. I always like a game company that tries more risk rather than keeping to their guns they usually turn to. It's refreshing every once in a while. I think this next one comes from the combination of having grown up with the Sega Genesis and for being a hardcore player. Really fast moments in video gaming. I think this one speaks for itself. Anytime where the game decides to pick up its pace is something that starts bringing out my hardcore gamer fire. Because this is stuff that usually brings out a lot that is required of the gamer's concentration, which is usually found in hard games. This could frankly happen anytime in video games. They could be games focused entirely around speed, it could come from a fast vehicle section, it could come from a power-up, just anything that demands more brain activity to process will get my attention. I don't know, I guess it was kind of how I was raised in video games. So roaming around in my natural environment is going to make me feel nice at home with video games. I should probably finish in saying that when the opposite happens, you know, when things slow down in video games a lot, like in water levels, I really don't care. I think it's because I've played so many video games revolved around them being slow, and I guess playing The Sims is my favorite casual game of all time really does help in that department. So, bottom line, I really love when games pick it up, but I won't lose my faith in video games if they tone it down either. I'm not picky with speed in video games. To me, there's a way to tell if developers care about me as a consumer enough to want me to play their game, and how much longer they want me to play it. And what do they have to put in to prove that? Extra content. Now I'm going to make this a bit more complicated. Next, there could be developers that'll wave extra content around in their video games, but I have to ask, are you doing it to satisfy a bullet point on the back of the box, or to satisfy me? If developers put in really lazy extra content with things like concept art or stuff that takes 2 seconds to glance over, that frankly disappoints me because it's like an invisible wall, an abrupt end to the game. True, and to be fair, it is their project and maybe things happen, such as time restrictions to publish a game, and who knows. But it does light up my life if there's content to mess around with for a while after beating the main game. And it doesn't have to be anything too big either. It could be harder difficulties, it could be extra challenges, cheat codes, collectibles, more unlockable items, etc. However, the type of content that doesn't impress me is, like said before, concept art, extra costumes, fake difficulty, encouraging redundant events, etc. I'm not really into the cosmetic stuff, but more into the gameplay material. As long as there's something original to tinker around with after the game is done, I'll be around the game way longer and remember it way more for the small details I appreciate the developers putting in that shows me that they care about their game. Now there are two types of video games, the kind that insist you do it their way and only their way, or the games where they give you a list of options and let you run off with what you want to do with your environment and solving problems. This needs a bit more explaining. You see, there are sometimes video games where they introduce a new gimmick or a new move and the game insists you only use this technique exclusively for a level or section. And you know what? I'm actually okay with that, because it does mean that the game is consistently adding new things to the game and I'm down with that. But you're waiting for the catch. And well, there is one. What adds that special something to the mix is how much more freedom and practical the moves actually are. For example, when a game teaches or tells you it's recommended to do it this way, but that you don't necessarily have to but can branch off and do it your own way. Yeah, now you're starting to catch on. I honestly like a lot of freedom in my video games, so I appreciate it when games teach me something I can run off and play with, rather than having to be lectured on how I can use its newest gadget. Unfortunately, more and more modern games are doing the silly, here, let me help you approach, but every once in a while, there's a game that slips in there that releases your leash and lets you run wild. And frankly, I love that. Anybody who has seen my countdown saw this from a mile away. While I'm not a completionist, I am an achievement hunter. I love it when a game explores what kind of potential it can bring out in a gamer. You know what I mean. Potential means a goal to strive towards. Something where you see it at first and you're like, no way am I going to get that good. But with some decent practice and dedication, you'll have a blast seeing how far you can go with it. Now this doesn't mean I'll let every hard game slide into my box of games I like to dominate. They have to be hard for the right reasons. If it's hard because it has clunky execution, bad controls, or where there's a delay to get your character moving where you want him to go, that game can go bye-bye on my list to take it to the next level with. That doesn't automatically mean I'll hate the game, it just means I know the game has limits. Now I know that there is the argument that easier games should be more enjoyable, and kudos to you. There are other gamers who genuinely want a relaxing time with video games, and that's what video games should be to them, relaxing. I had that side to me as well after a long while of playing hardcore games as well, or after a long day of work in real life. But I have that side to me when there's mud around, I'm going to go play in it and fling it everywhere. Now there's a huge debate going around that gameplay is more important than story and cutscenes. To be fair, that is a good point. Gamers do want to play games, not watch movies. That's what we have Netflix and the internet for. Here's my view on it, is that after working with so much gameplay throughout my life with video games, it honestly makes me happy to see something new being developed with video games. So you can say it's my guilty pleasure. Hey, I'm a novel writer. I like stories and have a soft spot for cutscenes. Now, while I enjoy getting into stories with video games, the thing that fascinates me is the characters. But not just any characters. I enjoy characters who have a history they talk about, and as a bonus, explain about their problems and weaknesses or experience going through them, because it makes it the prime for character development or adventure material. So games like Heavy Rain and Final Fantasy 13 fascinate me because the characters have their share of issues for all of the characters involved, and I love it. Some call those characters flawed, but I consider it a good thing. Flawed characters are funner to explore rather than watching perfect characters who need no exploration at all. In the end, I know some may disagree with me about something with this entry, but I have my right to my opinion, as does anyone else. I love my stories in video games just as much as gameplay, and that's the story I'm sticking with. Now the first thing that's going to pop up in your head when you see that text that I must be talking about boss battles. Well, not really, but it could involve those. I'm talking about those moments in a video game when a major event is going down, when something has been building for a while between something and it's time to settle the score. There are usually moments in the video games when the best music is going down, when the gameplay is at its peak. The presentation of the game gets to be the best that it could be. Instead of talking, I think it might be better to show you what I mean. I retired from video games since 2007. Well, after you play a lot of video games, and I mean a lot of video games, some patterns are going to come up where you've generally seen it all. After playing Super Mario Galaxy and The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess on the Wii, I decided to settle down with video games. Even today, I only buy 1 or 2 video games a year from the modern generation, maybe not even that much. The only game that came out this year that I played was Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain. You see, I grew up in a video game generation where video games were more experimental and didn't have much of a structure, which means we had video games back then where it dramatically changed things up a lot from video game to video game, and I liked that. Video games back then had more surprises and changes to gameplay. When video games start going into a structure like with modern gaming, they get a lot more predictable and it gets old really quick. Does this mean I stick exclusively to retro games? No. Instead, I look for underrated games or indie games. Underrated and indie games go more into the 90s type of gaming. There's more risk that you might not like the game because there might not be a structure, but there's also more of a chance to like it because it delivers something new. And when it delivers, it's always a breath of fresh air for me to see something entirely new with video games.
Just just thought I'd hijack the show for a moment and toss my hat in the ring. There's something I like in video games. What I love in games is something most gamers take for granted. It's boss battles. I'm not even that picky when it comes to boss battles. Just having them in the game gets me in a chipper mood. I mean any of them. Mini bosses, main bosses, sub bosses, final bosses.
Giant steak, birthday cake, large rice, chocolate shake!
Sorry, went on a bit of an episode there. The thing about bosses is I feel my skills are finally put to the test, and if the game pulls it off well enough, I get the complete package. Cool background music, awesome design, and fleshed out gameplay. Or I could just whack them over and over again, that works too. Yeah, games without bosses are like a burger without the patty. There's that certain zing that's missing.
I think everybody has a certain liking to something about a video game, something that everyone has a soft spot for and really likes seeing, and well, I'm no different. Some people love having good graphics, some love good music, some love good gameplay, some love to play multiplayer games, some want video games to remain faithful to what their series stands for, good controls, a good amount of content, just hundreds of things. Just think about it for a moment for yourself. What about a lot of video games makes you jump towards enjoying your video games, and if there's a lack of it, makes you avoid those games in the first place? And mine is fluidity. If there's one thing I have to say is in a lot of video games I like playing is to be comfortable in how my character interacts with the environment. I'm talking good animation and movement, that I can rely on my character to grab ledges, not having to worry about hitboxes, or shoot his gun knowing shots will connect. Can use items without any inventory hassle, the camera goes where I want it to go to see my surroundings immensely. I'm not specifically talking about control, I'm talking about how well the world works together to make it work as it's supposed to. Now this is where it's going to get interesting. Now the burning question, and I guess I'd better bring this up, what if the game isn't fluid? Like if it's stiff, has fixed camera angles, has delayed interaction between fighting enemies, has glitchy movement or tank controls, or etc. Does that mean I don't prefer to play those video games? And my answer is yes. I'm going to emphasize this, but I definitely need a decent level of fluidity in my video games for me to enjoy them. And if it doesn't pass, well, everybody has games that they naturally avoid, right? So it gives me the biggest sigh of relief in gaming if I come across a video game where I can move around my environment without any problems.